Professor Spooner, how are you?
Good morning, Frank.
Uh,
What's been on my mind the last few days is the way that absolutely everything in human society is changing in the way it's organized. And we've talked about this before, but somehow the changes seem to be becoming more and more fundamental. As we emerged as a new species from among the other primates, the main thing in the way our lives were organized was the difference between male and female.
hmm
And one would have thought that that would continue to be fairly basic. And of course, in the earliest forms of human society, the main form of organization was gender and kinship, which was all biologically based.
hmm
And the main result of the organization was that, or the way things were organized, was that everybody knew who they could expect to, where they could expect to find a marriage partner or a sexual
Great.
partner for reproduction. And then that became the central feature of every major religion, from the earliest religions of which we have no continuing evidence at all, to the major religions that began to form just over 2,000 years ago and finished up with Christianity and Judaism and Islam and
Mhm.
Buddhism, where the central feature of the religion in one way or another, and of course it varies very much and differs very much in the way it's organized, is the control of sexual relations and how marriage and the family, the importance of marriage as a lifelong relationship, and the way the family is formed and organized. And nobody, when I was growing up, or even when I was an adult at an earlier time, say in the middle of the last century, nobody had any idea that this was going to change, even though sexuality was becoming, few people were talking about it in the late 1950s and beginning of the 60s, and women had started wearing what in England we call trousers, and here I had to learn to call pants when I came across the Atlantic,
hmm
which was the first sign. It was absolute horror to begin with, that women should be dressing like men. And then, of course, every time I returned from where I was living at that time in Iran to London in the 1960s and 70s, it was one stage further.
Yes.
And then more recently, we've been beginning to see other things happening, which have certainly changed the way we think about sexuality and marriage, and people don't bother to get married anymore. I have several grandchildren of a marriageable age, some of whom get married and some of whom don't. But they have perfectly respectable lives, which would certainly work with marriage. So it's not that human behavior has necessarily changed, it's that their ideas of the way of the formality of organization has changed. Anyway, the latest thing that is happening is the idea that you can choose your own gender.
Yes.
And this, of course, I still don't really understand how it works, because I don't have any transgender people amongst my friends that I can talk to about this. But yesterday, as I was shopping, I saw that several people were wearing badges which told anybody who interacted with them what pronoun should be used in referring to them, whether they were his and him or she and hers.
Wow.
So it's not only that you can choose your own gender now, but you can get annoyed with people if they use the wrong one that you've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I decided I needed to find a restroom, I found that the restrooms were gender neutral. and that took me by surprise. And when I talked to a few people about that, I learned the reason for it, which I should have guessed, I suppose, but I didn't. Which was that the number of gender neutral people, no, not gender neutral, transgender people around is increasing. And when a transgender person uses a bathroom, restroom of the gender that they've chosen, rather than the gender that they were biologically endowed with, the other people may feel rather disturbed. And so every bathroom is now being made. There must be enough transgender people around.
All right. So they present a third requirement.
Yeah. So what this means is that the problem of the rate of change in the way things are being organized is becoming a bigger problem with the people who are resistant to change. And of course, that we've said before that this is one of the main problems of globalization generally, is that so many of the conflicts in the world today are conflicts between groups of people who are eager for change and welcome change, and people who are resistant to change because it disrupts the cultural order that they are used to and can't imagine it changing. And it means that they can no longer know actually how they should behave in order to be able to rely on other people and know what to expect from other people. So it really is a critical phase in the change of the way human social life is being organized.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And I think that if we, excuse me, on the East Coast, in the urbanized East Coast of the United States, are facing challenges, if you will, trying to keep up with the pace of change in this particular area, I can only assume that it might be more difficult in other areas of the country or the world to try to keep up with what's going on. And I mean, you're right. When you go back to the basic organization units of organizing, if you will, between genders, and that's really now been, excuse me, completely been called into question. And I was listening yesterday, driving somewhere, and the acting Attorney General of the United States was on Capitol Hill being questioned by the House Judiciary Committee. And I'm driving along, and one question comes from a female congresswoman, and she says, "Mr. Whitaker, what percentage of employees at the Justice Department are transgender employees?" And Whitaker said, "Well, I don't know. We have over 200,000 employees. I would assume that whatever percentage of transgender people there are in the overall population, that it would be roughly similar, but I can find out for you." And I remember thinking, well, that's sort of like an odd left field question. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't so odd or left field, that I too have seen the gender neutral restrooms. I too have responded to requests for proposals, if you will, from various companies who ask whether we have a gender neutral policy. And this is now a reality. It's a reality. And I don't know if this is how realities develop and occur, but this just sort of snuck up on me. And now all of a sudden there's the ability to change sexes, and it's okay. And
but if you become transgender, you're not allowed to join the U.S. Armed Forces.
This is true. That remains an exception.
And I'm wondering now, since I go to the gym every morning and the locker rooms are divided between male and female, I wonder whether the next thing that's going to happen is that they're going to be gender neutral as well in some way.
There could be. The Constitution will afford them the same protection, the same status as they would a male or female, I suppose. Yeah. And then this is really I think, where you were going earlier, if I may. that's really what begins to crank people up who are really afraid of change, right? Because people say, wait a minute. I mean, we're giving this gender neutral group the same status as a man and a woman that God created and gave to the world, and then we're off to the races. And that's really what leads to problems.
We need a new prophet.
Well, something either that or I need to get educated on this because I'm not quite sure I completely understand it all.
Well, anyway, it's becoming from a social scientist point of view more and more interesting, because one wonders what's going to happen next. Is the fundamental feature of all the organization of human social life is actually fading away.
Yes.
One can't really imagine what the next phase will be, and it's something that started in the 50s, or possibly before. You could say it started with the suffragette movement, and it's being accentuated by all the women wearing white for the State of the Union speech.
Yeah, that was something.
So there's several things going on at the same time, but they're all moving in the same direction with the continuing problem of eagerness for change and resistance to change, and the resistance always loses out. Resistance
can't stop it. It's like standing in front of a wave. So, all right. Well, Professor Spooner, thank you very much. Back to basics, but well worth it. All right. We'll talk next week. All right. Bye.
Yes.